Okay, it is 2 past the hour, so we are going to go ahead and jump in. Just want to welcome you all again. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation. My name is Erin Rees Clayton. I am Associate Director of Science and Technology for GFI. I have been with GFI for 4.5 years now, so joined just a few months after GFI was founded. My background is in science. I did my undergrad degree in chemistry, PhD in genetics, and a master's in public health and epidemiology. So today's conversation will definitely have a scientific lens, but I hope the conversation will also be broad enough that it will be applicable to those of you with other backgrounds. We are recording this just so that everyone knows, and we will make sure that it gets posted to our YouTube channel, and also that the slides that I'm going to share get sent out to all registered attendees as well. My colleague Renee that helps me with that is on vacation this week, so it will likely be early next week before we get the follow-up email sent out and get the recording up on YouTube. But that will indeed happen so that you have these as resources for the future. So the way we will use our time today, I have some slides that I'd like to talk through just to make sure that everyone has a little bit of background, that we're all on the same page for what GFI does and what we mean by alternative proteins, and hopefully some general information that answers some of the most common questions we get from people about careers. But then I want to make sure that we save a significant portion of our time to answer your specific questions. And I want to thank all of you who have put questions on the document that Renee sent out last week. I will address those first, but please feel free to add additional questions to the chat or the Q&A part of Zoom here. If we have time, I will try and get through as many questions as possible. And if we don't have time, I'm happy to type up answers offline, and when Renee sends out the recording and the slides, she can include those as well. So without further ado, let me share my screen and launch into our content here. Okay. So as I said, I want to start with just a quick overview of GFI and alternative proteins, and then give a high-level overview of alternative protein career fields and relevant backgrounds, mention some GFI resources related to alt protein jobs and careers that might be useful to you, and then we'll spend a significant portion of our time today on the Q&A. So just quickly, many of you may be familiar with GFI, but in case you're not, we are a nonprofit. We are a global nonprofit. So I am based in the United States, and we have a team in the US, but we now have over 100 staff in 6 different regions of the world. So we have GFI staff in not only the US, but Brazil, India, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Israel. So just as our food system is truly a global system, GFI works globally as well. And we really focus on developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We do that through 3 primary programmatic areas. One is science and technology. This is the program that I am part of. And we really focus on trying to identify what the technical needs are for the alternative protein field. What research needs to be done to address those barriers, and how we can create a research and training ecosystem that will help advance this field. One of our other program areas is corporate engagement. So this is the department that partners with companies and investors to help drive investment, scale the supply chain, accelerate innovation, and really try and work with the private sector. And then the third program area is our policy team. And they work to advocate for a fair policy and public research funding for alternative proteins. And again, those 3 program areas are operating in all 6 regions of the world where GFI exists. And so our theory of change in a nutshell is to make something people want. And we believe that based on the trends that we're seeing with an increasing global consumption of meat, we're really going to have more success in addressing climate change, animal welfare, zoonotic diseases, food security, if we give people the food that they want, but just produced in a better way, rather than trying to get people to change their behavior or eat different foods than what they want to eat. And let's face it, meat tastes good. That's why people largely want to eat it. And there's a lot of culture and a lot of social considerations in that as well. So we really focus on, as I mentioned, trying to make meat, but do it in a way that's good for people, good for the planet, and good for animals. And so the three pillars of alternative protein production that we focus on are plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation-derived ingredients. The plant-based meat, egg, and dairy are probably one of the categories that the general public might be most familiar with, because we see these products on the market already. So these are your meat or egg or milk replacements that are made exclusively from plant proteins. So the Beyond Burger, the Impossible Burger are two of the kind of newer, most popular plant-based burgers, but there are many other types of plant-based meat on the market as well. When we talk about cultivated meat and dairy, this is where we're starting with for cultivated meat, a small sample of animal cells. So these are cells that come from an animal, and those cells are replicated and grown into muscle, which is meat, just outside of the animal. So cultivated meat is genuine animal meat that's produced without the need to raise and slaughter animals. And then the third pillar here is fermentation-derived ingredients. So this is where we're taking a microbe such as yeast or bacteria, and we're producing proteins and ingredients in these microbes. Sometimes those proteins then are purified, are taken out of the microbes, and that's the ingredient or product that we want to use. And sometimes it's whole biomass fermentation, where the microbes themselves become the product. So these are the three alternative protein production platforms that GFI focuses on. And while we tend to think of them as distinct pillars, I think it's also important to recognize that we expect these pillars to join and interact in really exciting and important ways as this industry develops. So it's very likely that we will see products that are maybe a part of two or all three of these pillars moving forward. And typically, this is kind of, where I think we tend to think when we talk about alternative proteins and alternative protein products, is really this end product. Are we making a burger? Are we making chicken? Are we making seafood? But it's important to realize that the entire value chain, the entire ecosystem is what we're working to develop here, because we're not going to get these end products without also developing raw materials, ingredients, and inputs. We need research and development in order to do that, investment in order to make these end products. And if we're truly going to make a difference in what people are eating, we need to make sure that these end products get to the consumers. So we need to think about what's downstream of that as well in terms of distribution channels. And then again, there's this whole area of enabling parts of the ecosystem. So workforce development, different business services, compliance, safety, legal aspects. So we're really working on building an entire industry here. And I think it's important to think very broadly about the entire ecosystem and recognize that there are career opportunities and needs in all parts of this ecosystem. So what are some of the career fields and relevant backgrounds for alternative proteins? One thing that I'd like to mention is that alt protein jobs exist across many sectors. So for scientists in particular, I think academia is one of the most common or obvious career paths. If you're in graduate school getting a master's or a PhD, I think this is, one of the career paths that will seem familiar. So there are opportunities at universities around the world to do research in alternative proteins. There's a need for teaching and training. And then I think it's important to think about in the US, we have extension programs at our land grant universities. And so these are programs affiliated with the universities that really focus on engaging with the local community. And I think there's a lot that can be done in those types of roles for alternative proteins as well. Moving over to the private sector, B2C means business to consumer, and B2B means business to business. In the alt protein space, there are certainly opportunities in both of these. So we have the companies that are making the consumer products, the B2C companies, but there's also a lot of opportunity in this B2B space. So what types of technologies and other needs are there to support the companies that are making plant-based meat or cultivated meat? And so again, the startup landscape for alternative proteins has really exploded over the past few years, but there are also established companies, both food and life science companies that are involved in this space. And there's a big role to be played in investing. These companies need the financial support in order to do what they want. Thirdly, there are job opportunities with government. And again, this could be doing research in government labs or for the government. But there's also the policy and regulatory side, particularly with cultivated meat. This is a novel product, and it's not entirely clear in many countries what the pathway is going to look like for the regulation of these products. So for someone, particularly if you're interested in both science and policy, this could be a really exciting area to get into. And then thirdly, related to government is on the funding side. We need a lot more dollars flowing into alternative protein research. And so there are opportunities to be program officers or program leaders for government research funding agencies. And then last but not least, there are nonprofit jobs available. So organizations like GFI, New Harvest, the Plant-Based Foods Association, as we see organizations develop to support this industry, there are opportunities in the nonprofit sector as well. One of the questions that we get a lot is, what background do I need if I want to be an alt protein scientist? And so this is my attempt to capture some examples of what backgrounds might be relevant and what pillar they might be relevant for. I will say that I'm sure this is not totally comprehensive. There's probably areas that I've forgotten, and you could probably make the argument that all of these areas of science could play a role somehow in each of these pillars. But what I really want to demonstrate with this is that there is a wide variety of scientific and technical backgrounds that have a role to play in this space. And for most of us, particularly if we are currently in our graduate training or almost through our undergraduate training, or maybe we're working in a career now and thinking about switching, we didn't have an option to be explicitly trained in alternative proteins. So unfortunately, at this point, you can't get a degree in alternative proteins. So all of the scientists entering this field are coming from one of these more traditional scientific areas. I know some of the work that we're doing at GFI in collaboration with professors and researchers around the world, we're hoping to change that soon. And I hope that in the not too distant future, there will be opportunities for scientists to get degrees in alternative proteins. But right now, it is not unusual to be coming over to this field from a different background. I wanted to highlight one article that came out a couple months ago. I think it was in April. And again, we'll share these slides next week. And so you'll be able to click on all of the links here. But I found this useful because it was focused on how we really need to reimagine modern STEM careers, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics careers, um, as not a very structured pipeline. I think we tend to think about talent pipelines and things being very rigid and having one specific path that people need to take. And this article was saying we really need to think about science careers as a braided river. And so that's what this diagram is showing. This is the diagram they included in the article. And this conceptualization, I think, is helpful because it demonstrates that there are many, many ways that people can come into a science career, um, also leave a science career, different ways that they get support. Um, and I think that while this is true for science as a whole, it's very true for alternative proteins as well, particularly because, as I mentioned, we don't have established alt protein training programs at this point. Um, so I just want to encourage everyone that there is not a right or wrong path at this point. Everybody's path is going to look a little bit different. And I think that that makes it really exciting and is probably in some ways a benefit to the field because we have a lot of people with different backgrounds coming together to try and solve problems and bringing their unique training and experiences. So recommend taking a read through this article if you're interested. I found it useful to help think through how we think about career paths. And again, what I want to focus on too, and just remind everyone is while I have a science and technology lens, and there is definitely a need for scientists in this space, if we're thinking about the whole entire ecosystem, it is not limited to those hard science and engineering backgrounds. There's a need for public health, sociology, nutrition, certainly, environmental science, economics, rural development. We move into, food science and culinary science. Really, how do we cook and prepare these foods in a way that is appealing to consumers? We need people to be able to communicate what these products are and why they're important, what benefits they bring. So there's certainly a role for communications and journalism, the public policy, law, and legal side. As we mentioned a little bit, the business and entrepreneurship, investment finance, logistics, supply chain management. So there's really opportunities for a huge variety of backgrounds, and we need all of these to build this industry. So why is now a particularly exciting time to consider a career in alt protein? These are just a few of the reasons, the answers I would give to this question. Again, I'm sure that there are others that people have, but I think we're at a point where the industry is advanced enough that it's possible to find support and partners to help you with what you want to do, compared to 5 years ago, where maybe a significant amount of time and effort would have been needed just to connect to the right people and partners. But we're still very, very early. This is a very young industry. And so there's still a massive amount of white space opportunities to address. So while it seems like it's getting more crowded, I think there's still a lot of space for new companies, new research, a lot of questions that need to be answered. Also, I think we spend so much of our lives at work, at our career, that I think it helps to be doing something that has a positive impact. And alternative proteins are maybe a bit unique in the number of potential cause areas that they address. So again, I think we see benefits for animal welfare. We see environmental benefits through a range of things such as resource utilization, land use, emissions. From a public health perspective, There's potential to reduce the risk of zoonotic diseases, antibiotic resistance, hopefully create products that are more nutritious and healthy for people. There are some reasons why all proteins could improve food security. So there's just really a lot of positive impact that can be made from working in this field. Thirdly, there's really the opportunity to become a leader in your field and create a successful career. One of the examples that I tend to give a lot is for a tissue engineer that's working in the biomedical space to perhaps create organs for human transplant. That is a really important and valuable area of research, but it's also pretty crowded. A lot of tissue engineers are working in that space. And there's a lot more opportunity in cultivated meat. So you could really, I think, more easily carve out a niche for yourself, a research expertise area, and really become a leader in that area. Certainly, with as new as this field is, there are lots of opportunities to learn new things and really be on the cutting edge of technology. So I think that is also exciting. And the other thing to me that is really exciting about alternative proteins is the fact that they're really operating at the intersection of many disciplines. And the one example that I threw on here just because I wanted to say it, because I think that this is pretty cool, is that the European Space Agency just hired a cultivated meat scientist because there's, they need to think about how are we going to feed astronauts in space, and particularly if they're going on long distance missions, they can only bring so much from Earth, and so cultivated meat might be a way to feed astronauts in space. So again, this is maybe a unique example, but there's just a need to be able to understand the muscle physiology and tissue engineering along with food science, or thinking about the plant breeding and genetics with protein chemistry. So really kind of bringing these disciplines together in unique and interesting ways. So one of the other questions I get a lot is, what is it like to work at GFI? And I'm happy to answer specific questions if anyone has them about that during the Q&A. But I also wanted to highlight the fact that we do have specific hiring information sessions. The next one actually happens tomorrow afternoon, but those happen every other Wednesday, and you can find additional details in the document I've linked here. Again, we will make sure that these slides get sent out so you could attend one of those sessions. Those focus specifically on working at GFI and would be a great way for you to get your questions about that answered. And want to just highlight that gfi.org/careers is where we post our open positions, both for our US office as well as our international affiliates. So please visit that site if you are interested in seeing what jobs GFI has available. I will spend, let me check my time here. Okay, good. Just wrap up here in the next few minutes so that we have at least 30 minutes for the Q&A, but wanted to just mention a few GFI resources related to alternative protein jobs and careers that might be useful. We did earlier this year launch a new website, gfi.org, and I have found it personally easier to find things. So I encourage you to take a look at the website. This is our homepage. You can start out clicking on science, industry, or policy if you are particularly interested in one of those areas. If you are more interested in one particular alternative protein pillar, you can choose plant-based, cultivated, or fermentation as a way to kind of focus on resources we have available in that area. And then up here is where we have our careers link. So that will take you directly to some of our career resources. I'll highlight just a few of those for you. One is our student resource guide. This is really a good resource if you are a student and interested in figuring out what opportunities might exist for you, what resources might exist, and how you might start to move towards an alternative protein career. We also have a series that we call our Pioneers of Science, which provide the stories of several scientists that are working in the alternative protein space. And I always find it interesting to hear people's backgrounds, and this will give you a good sense of just the variety that exists in how people got to where they are today. Our alternative protein career portal, which is what you will get to if you click on that little careers part of our homepage, will take you to our careers board. So these are not GFI jobs. These are other jobs that we've been made aware of in the alternative protein space. So you can peruse those to see what's available. If you're currently looking for work, it's a great place to look for open jobs. We also have a talent database. This is where people who have something to offer, you may not see a specific open job that fits with your interests and skills, but you could sign up and put your information into our talent database. We share this database with companies and researchers in the alternative protein space. So when they're looking for additional people, this is kind of a curated database for them, and you're welcome to add your information to that. And then finally, I just want to mention our GF Ideas community. This is a community of scientists and entrepreneurs who are working across the alt protein technology pillars, and just provides a good way to connect with others who can potentially be a source of support or collaborators, or just help answer questions that you have. If you're specifically interested in entrepreneurship, we do have a startup manual that talks through some important considerations to make if you're thinking about starting your own company. We also have a company database that gives some information about all of the existing companies in this space that can be useful for you to see what might exist in your area, or to see what types of products and things people are working on. And last but not least, this is the area that I focus on mostly, is research and funding. We have a collaborative research directory, which has a lot of academic researchers in it. And again, this is a good place to go if you're looking for labs to do research in, or just want to get a sense of what kinds of people and scientists are working in this space. So the people in our collaborative research directory are working in the alt protein space and interested in having collaborations with others. And then we also have our funding database, which lists research funding opportunities, and our GFI research grant program. So again, we can't make the research happen without the funding. So this is another important area that we work on. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for attending today. I hope that those slides and that information was helpful and gave a useful overview and some things to consider. And I am happy to spend the next 30 minutes or however much time of that we need to answer the questions that you have.